Okay, so at this, what I feel is like a very distinctive point in the project. I'm at this point where I feel like, I think this is an Adam Savage phrase, I feel like I can see it from the air. I feel like, all right, now I've got a sense of what needs to be done. I just need to kind of work through it. And that idea of seeing it from the air, I think, is a really interesting metaphor, because something else that I've noticed is that there generally tends to be two different halves of a project like this. There's a climb and there's a descent. The climb, before you can see things from the air, is when I'm kind of trying to figure things out. There's a lot of brainstorming. There's a lot of really trying to make sure the groundwork is in place and everything is being built on good decisions. But then there comes a point where I see what needs to be done, and then it moves into the descent. And something that I've learned is once I reach that point, I need to finish as quickly as possible. I need to switch from just giving myself plenty of bandwidth and, giving space for ideas and whatever, to just hurry, hurry, hurry. And the reason for that is that if the descent gets too long, the whole project can kind of get derailed, because it stops being fun and it starts being a chore. And then it starts being a grind. And then it starts being a nightmare. And it may seem slightly counterintuitive to just rush, rush, rush. What if there are mistakes? What if there are whatever? And there might well be in this final stage, but that's okay, because you can rush. Well, actually, I generally find that the best thing to do is to finish as soon as possible, and then take a little bit of a break, and then come back and then fix the mistakes you made when you were rushing. I find that's a much better approach to continuing to be slow and careful throughout the whole project. I'm not sure whether or not it's the case that once you see the whole thing from the air and you see what needs to be done, it kind of loses a little bit of the motivation and fun. I don't know. But I have, I guess, developed the instinct over time that once it's possible to just make a whole bunch of to-do lists and power through them, that's the thing to do, and to do it as quick as possible. Okay, so I went out and shot the car footage. I went to an empty car park. I drove around very slowly and I shot the footage. Now, I'm not a photographer, I'm not a videographer, I'm kind of running to catch up on all this sort of stuff. And characteristically, I underexposed it. It's dark, it's grainy, it's noisy. And I got the footage back and I just looked at it and thought, is this usable? And as I was mulling on that and kind of playing around with it and trying to find ways to fix it, I found myself thinking about an Adam Savage video I'd watched recently. I'm going to be talking a lot about Adam Savage in this video series, by the way. So, Adam Savage, former Mythbusters host, former worker at ILM Effects Studio that did Star Wars and everything else. He was talking about many years ago making movie props with one of his sons, and saying to him, look, you need to come to terms with the fact you're probably going to need to make each of these props like 3 times before you get the result that you want. And he said, kids being kids, which had no patience for that. But he said that's a reality of making. You need to be prepared for the fact you may need to make the thing more than once. And I was thinking about that because as I played around with this footage, I found that there were ways that I could fix it and compensate for the problems. For example, it was dark and grainy, but I found there was a kind of filter I could put on that made it look like it was shot through a windscreen with rain on it. And that compensated for it, and it looked kind of moody and it sort of worked. And I thought that is actually more how I do stuff. I come up with interesting creative decisions by getting things wrong and then finding fixes for them. A few days later, I woke up and thought, no, I'm going to reshoot the whole thing. So I shot the whole thing stationary in my driveway, and it looks so much better. Okay, so with the car footage shot, it's now a case of putting it into Final Cut Pro, starting to edit the music video and thinking about what the backdrop's going to be behind the car. For that, I'm using generative AI art. I'm using Midjourney to generate images, and I'm using Pika Labs to animate those. Now, I'm actually going to talk much more about this whole generative AI process that I've been dipping my toe, kind of jumping in head first to. I'm going to talk about it in much more depth in the next episode, in the song Young Man Cut Down on His Prime it's just more efficient for me to make 2 of these episodes at the same time. So I've been working on them both, and for reasons, I ended up doing the Young Man Cut Down in His Prime first. This one I'm kind of finding, already onto the next thing, I'm kind of finding more challenging because I'm running up against the limitations of Midjourney a bit more. But again, I'm going to talk about that in the next episode because there's a lot to talk about, and to a certain extent, making both of these music videos has been kind of the same process. One thing that I will say though is I've been very cautious taking on this whole The Process project about overextending when it comes to music videos, about thinking of an idea, getting stuck into it and just realizing it's way more complex and way more out of my skill set than I thought. I'm already starting to feel that I'm actually building up some muscles here. I'm learning how to do filmmaking, and I'm incrementally taking on more and more challenging things, which is what I was worried I would do, and then would just take way longer than I should do. Actually, I'm kind of feeling like it's okay at the moment, and generative AI is playing a big part in that. But it's also full of thorny ethical issues and probably pretty soon legal issues too. So, as I say, I'll talk about that more in the next one.